of Sri Aurobindo's social, cultural, educational thought has helped me sort of decenter some of my own understandings of who we are as a society, who we are as a people, what it is that, how we define culture, how we understand culture, how we understand cultural phenomenon, while at the same time there is an inner journey. The true decolonization is an inner journey where it's like you are living in your own Swaraj, the self-rule, but that is the self with the capital S. But there is a smaller self, the apparent self in this current life, as an Indian that I'm born in, and with the kind of educational training and academic training that I've had. So how to understand that as well. And there I've also taken the help of another philosopher deeply influenced by Sri Aurobindo, a great scholar of Mahabharata studies, Chaturvedi Badrinath, who's also spoken of the idea of the dharmic tradition has always emphasized both the inner journey, but the inner journey that takes place within the outer context. So taking that framework, I've talked about the decolonizing part with Sri Aurobindo. So before I go into the table of contents or what are some of the topics that I've covered, I'll just quickly talk about the book cover, which Gayatri mentioned, and then I'll take a pause and see if there are questions, and then we can kind of go over that. So this is how I understand it. Decolonizing with Sri Aurobindo. As an Indian born 2 decades after independence of India from the British colonial rule, I know that big, medium and small traces of colonial consciousness have been a part of the time, culture and society I grew up in, and of the identity I call my own. I do not need to see myself as an antithesis to a Western identity, because that would mean giving up part of who I am. I say this not because I lived for many years in the West, but because West is a part of India and of most Indians of my background, regardless of where they live. We are talking in a Western language. So why hide? Why shy away from that? But I'm also acutely aware of how this colonial consciousness is rooted deep in the Indian state and bureaucratic machinery, mainstream education system, ways in which Indians identify with or relate to many cultural and social institutions, and also in the minds and ways of thinking of several generations of Indians. I'm growing more conscious of my constant attempts to be aware of this colonial consciousness and its roots, and a personal need to decolonize my mind. This decolonization is not something that happens instantly. It is an ongoing, experiential, lived process at individual and collective levels. It is a part of the ongoing journey of myself. Obviously, only the apparent outer self, because the real self will be above and beyond any such national or cultural identity. But the inner knowing of my real self cannot be unaccompanied by the outer knowing of my apparent self, the individuality that I hold on to in this present manifestation of my true inner self. It may sound self-aggrandizing, but for lack of a better way to put it, I am at present seeking my true intellectual Swaraj, an uncolonized state of mind as a first step towards a self-rule or rule of my inner consciousness. Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have been my guides, my teachers, companions and inspiration through their own words and others' works based on their words. I believe that the process of decolonizing also depends on where one is located. For Indians living in the West, this process works differently than those living in India. And this, of course, I'm saying this also based on my experience.